This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi everyone, I'm Meteo Mundo Chief Meteorologist Rusty McCraney. This is going to be your tropics update for the Caribbean and the Bahamas for this Wednesday, September the 6th. And obviously the big story is going to be with Tropical Storm Lee. As of the recording of this video, Lee has winds of 70 miles an hour, which means it's a high-end tropical storm. Get to 74, you get yourself a hurricane. And really at any point in time on Wednesday, Lee is forecast to become a hurricane and just continue to grow very rapidly through the weekend. As a matter of fact, by the end of this, and really even by the early part of the weekend, Lee is forecast to become a major Category 4 hurricane with winds of 150 miles an hour. Lee could even become a Category 5. There's not much really stopping it, at least for a time, reaching Category 5 strength. This is a tremendous storm that we're going to need to be talking about, keep a very close eye on, obviously, the next several days. Right now, Lee is moving to the west-northwest at 12 knots or 14 miles an hour. We'll talk more about the models coming up. I want to zoom in a little bit more on the path from the hurricane center. And again, at this point in time, it does not have a direct impact to the Leeward Islands, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, or Puerto Rico, but we're still talking about a powerful hurricane that'll be moving very, very close. And again, one thing I want to mention is it's great to see that the center line from the hurricane center and even that cone of uncertainty, which by the way, yesterday, the southern side of that cone was scraping the Leeward Islands, okay? It shifted farther north. That is a good shift with the models. But friends, these are just lines on a map. They're not gospel. I mean, the models have gotten a lot better over the last many years. But again, we have to stay vigilant when you're talking about a potential Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane moving within a couple of hundred miles from your area. I can do this with our radar. I can actually take a look at how far away we are from some of the islands. So let's say from the British Virgin Islands up to that center line, we're somewhere around 250 miles, okay? Yesterday, it was a little bit closer to 200 miles, so there's been about a 40 or 50 mile shift to the north. That's good. If you're looking at where that cone of uncertainty is, again, it's going to be a lot closer. You're only looking at about 70 miles of clearance from the far western side. Obviously, that would make a big difference trying to bring more direct impacts if for some reason Lee were to be a little bit more on this line rather than up on that line. If you get to a place like Anguilla, we'll take a look at that. Zoom up there, you're looking at about a little more than 215 miles. So there's a bit of a buffer, but look, if you live in these areas, the entire Leeward Islands, anywhere from, Guadeloupe and Montserrat and St. Thomas for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, St. Croix included in that, Anguilla, I've already mentioned, Puerto Rico, Antigua, Barbuda, please pay very, very close attention to what's happening with Lee over the next several days. It's just going to be one of those storms. It's going to be moving close enough that I really want you to keep very close attention to it. When we look at the models are in very good agreement with that center line track for the hurricane center, and that's exactly what they're keeping. But again, you're looking at a hurricane with 150 plus mile an hour winds moving very close to the area. Obviously, the sea conditions are going to get kicked up as well. There's going to be some wind and rain coming in with that large of a storm, but we really want to try and avoid the direct impacts. Now, further down the line, we'll be talking about what's going to be potentially happening in the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. If you notice that just beyond that track from the hurricane center, the models that go out a little bit beyond it begin that recurve to the north around the western ridge, western edge of the ridge of high pressure in the Atlantic. So we do expect a northerly recurve, hopefully well away from the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas, but obviously now we're getting even farther out in time and more uncertainty is built in with these models. So for the Turks and Caicos, especially the eastern side of the Bahamas, we have to keep a really close eye on that for you as we get into early next week. Let's see what's happening right now with the radar. This is the GFS model, okay? And this is the same model that I used yesterday, and we'll let that loop into motion in time for you right now. And again, it's going to develop Lee. It's going to keep Lee away from the Leeward Islands and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and begin that recurve up to the north. As a matter of fact, I can pause it right there and we'll go back to that spatial tool that I was using, and I'll show you that from, let's say, the eastern side of the Bahamas, now you're looking at somewhere around 500 plus miles from the center, from the GFS model. That would be good news for the entire Bahamas and the Turks and the Caicos, but obviously it's something we have to keep a very close eye on. Again, these are just models at this point in time, but we need to stay very vigilant as far as what we would anticipate happening. Let me put this model back into motion for you right now. I'll clear off that line. And again, just want to loop that for you one more time. And you can again see that turn around the western edge of that area of high pressure. All of the major global models do not have a direct impact for the Leeward Islands. They don't have a direct impact for the Bahamas. And then we get a little bit closer as we get to the United States East Coast. And that's something we'll talk about as we get a little bit farther out in time. This is the European model. And the European model does take that curve, as you can see, and then potentially right at the end begins to move it back slightly west towards the Carolinas. It's something we have to keep a close eye on, whether there would be a shave for the U.S. East Coast after this. But first things first, and that's we got to get it past the Leeward Islands and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. We got to see if it gets anywhere near the Turks and the Caicos and the Bahamas, and then we'll see what happens with the U.S. East Coast. That being said, you will anticipate in any of these areas that I just mentioned that sea conditions are going to be outrageous as Lee moves by. We're going to have extremely large easterly swells beginning to pick up in these areas. So if you have any boating interests in these areas, please keep that in mind as well. Again, friends, if you live in any of these areas that I mentioned, please stay very vigilant. I'll keep you updated every day right here. Thanks for joining us for today. And remember, if you do like this video and you want the latest information, all you have to do, like and subscribe right here. We're Meteo Mundo.